have another one of those truths that will help you feel lighter and freer and more aligned almost immediately if you really let it in. And it's this: you do not have to keep everything your mind created. And I think that matters because a lot of people unconsciously live as though they do. They think that if a thought has been there a long time, it must be true. If a fear feels familiar, it must belong. If they have carried something for years, it must be a part of who they are. If their mind created a pressure pattern, an insecurity, a story, an identity, or a reaction, they think they are supposed to just keep living with it. But I really do not believe that. I think a lot of people are carrying around mental and emotional baggage that they are treating like truth simply because it has been with them a long time. And familiarity is very convincing. That's a light bulb moment, right? Familiar does not mean true, and familiar does not mean aligned, and familiar does not mean it belongs to your higher self. Familiar does not mean it deserves permanent residence in your mind, your nervous system, your identity, or your life. And that is important because I think a lot of suffering stays alive not just because something happened, but because people are still keeping what got created around what happened. They're still keeping the meaning, the shame, the fear, the story, the identity, the pressure, the self judgment, the interpretation, the emotional residue, the old survival response. And that matters because now they are not only dealing with life, they're dealing with what their mind built around life and then decided to preserve. And I think a lot of people never stop questioning that. They question other people, they question circumstances, they question timing, they question what happened, but they do not always question what they have continued to keep. And that is where this week gets really deep because the question is no longer only, why do I feel this way? Why does this keep happening? Why am I like this? The deeper question becomes, what am I still carrying that I do not need to keep? And that is a very different question. I think it opens a very different door because then healing is not just about adding more, like more effort, more tools, more discipline, more understanding, more trying, more fixing. Sometimes healing is subtractive. Sometimes peace is subtractive. Sometimes higher performance is subtractive. Sometimes freedom is subtractive. Sometimes the real shift is, I do not need to keep this fear. I do not need to keep this identity. I do not need to keep this false meaning. I do not need to keep this old version of me. I do not need to keep this pressure pattern. I do not need to keep this interpretation of that fear created. That is a powerful realization. I think it fits every part of life. It fits stress. People keep old urgency. They keep over responsibility. They keep the story that everything is on them. They keep the pattern of bracing. They keep the belief that if they do not stay mentally tight, things will fall apart. And then they wonder why peace feels so far away. But peace and tightness do not really live in the same place. Peace often begins when a person stops preserving the very inner patterns that keep activating the stress. And it fits relationships too, that people keep old hurt, old defenses, old assumption, old stories about what something or somebody meant, old evidence for why they should not soften, old identity around being the one who is disappointed, left out, unseen, betrayed, or misunderstood. And then they live inside those old meetings. And this fits health and wellness too. People keep body shame. They keep the identity of being the one who always struggles. They keep fear after slips. They keep all or nothing thinking. They keep the old self concept. They keep the emotional charge around food, the scale, or their body. And because they keep feeding those old mental creations, they keep living inside them. It fits high performance and sports so clearly also. Athletes keep the miss. Golfers keep the bad hole. Shooters keep the target they missed 2 stations ago. High achievers keep the pressure that used to help them survive. They keep the false identity that says, I'm the one who gets tight. I'm the one who chokes. I'm the one who can't relax. I'm the one who has to stay in pressure to perform. And then they carry all of that into the next moment. And that is heavy. And the zone is not heavy. Flow is not heavy. Connection is not heavy. The higher self is not heavy. What is heavy is what fear adds. And what is heavy is what ego preserves. What is heavy is what the mind keeps dragging forward when it should have let it go. And I think this is one of the reasons so many people feel tired in a way that sleep does not fix, because they are carrying too much mentally. Not only today's demands, old baggage, old meaning, old identities, old pressure, old self-attack, old conclusions, old stories that are still living in the mind like tenants that never left. I think one of the most freeing things a person can realize is this: not everything in your mind belongs to you. Just because it moved through your mind does not make it your truth. Just because fear created it does not make it your identity. And just because it repeated does not make it sacred. And just because it feels loud does not make it aligned. And that is huge, because then people stop assuming every thought deserves obedience. Every emotion deserves preservation. Every story deserves permanence. Every identity deserves loyalty. And that is where discernment begins. I think discernment is such a big part of this week's theme, because it is not about pretending nothing happened. It's not about bypassing feelings. It's not about fake positivity. It's not about becoming numb or detached. It's about sorting. It's about recognizing. It's about true. It that this is true. This is false. This is loving. This is fear made. This belongs. This does not. This is aligned with my deeper self. This is just old conditioning. This is ego trying to protect something. This is not what I want to keep carrying the rest of my life. That is the real work. And honestly, I think it is a, spiritual work also, because for those of us who understand the deeper layer, the mind is not just random. There is the small self, the fearful self, the egoic self, the defended self, the self that overreacts and clings and protects, embraces and judges and compares and distorts. And then there's the deeper self, the higher self, the wiser self, the more connected self, the self that is closer to truth and love and clarity and peace and alignment. And a lot of what people keep carrying did not come from that higher place. It came from fear. It came from confusion. It came from ego. It came from pain. It came from old survival patterns. It came from false interpretations. And that is why letting go of those things is not loss. It is discernment. It is alignment. It is freedom. It is a huge part of reconnecting with the zone, with the higher self, with flow, with greater consciousness, because the zone is not the place where you are dragging every false identity and fear story behind you. The zone is light. The zone is open. The zone is free. The zone is what becomes available when all that conscious interference, all that fear made clutter, all that mental baggage quiets down enough that something deeper can move. And that is why this week's theme fits so beautifully with your whole body of work and everything that you face in your life. Because whether someone is trying to feel better, perform better, heal, lose weight, or live with more peace, the question is often not only, what do I need to start doing? Sometimes it is, what do I need to stop carrying? That is a much deeper question, because maybe the issue is not that the person needs a whole new self. Maybe they need less false baggage. Maybe they need less loyalty to what fear made. Maybe they need less identification with what never actually belonged to their truest self in the first place. I think one of the reasons this is so important is because people get attached to what has hurt them, not because they love pain, but because identity gets built around pain. Pressure can start to feel like ambition, and self-criticism can start to feel like responsibility, and anxiety can start to feel like caring, and overthinking can start to feel like wisdom. Control can start to feel like safety, and old shame can start to feel like humility. Fear can start to feel like realism. And once that happens, people stop questioning what those things are costing them. But there is always a cost. What is costing you? Or what is it costing you to keep the belief that you're always the one who falls apart? What is it costing you to keep the old story that you are behind? What is it costing you to keep body shame? What is it costing you to keep every miss and every embarrassment, every pressure pattern? What is it costing you to keep the identity of being someone who always has to struggle? That cost matters, because many times people will not loosen their grip until they see how expensive the thing they are carrying has become. So, practically, how do we work with this? I think the first step is noticing what you are keeping, not just what you think, what you are preserving. What are you still carrying from yesterday, from years ago, from that performance, from that relationship, from that season, from that failure, from that old self? What are you still keeping alive inside of you? That is a powerful question. And the second step is stop confusing repetition with truth. Just because you have thought it 1,000 times does not make it true. Just because it become automatic does not make it aligned. Just because it feels deeply familiar does not mean it belongs to your higher self. And that matters. And the third step is ask whether it's actually yours to keep. And that one question can change so much. Is this actually mine to keep? Does this belong to the life that I want? Does this belong to who I really am? Does this create more truth, peace, trust, love, and freedom? Or is this just something fear created that I've gotten used to carrying? And the fourth step is choose what stays, because this is not just about emptying out the mind for no reason. It's about being more intentional about what remains. What stays? Truth, love, peace, self respect, clarity, presence, alignment, wisdom, connection. The things that are life giving, not life draining. And the fifth step is practice release in real time, not just in theory, in real time. When the old pressure story shows up, notice it. When the old identity shows up, notice it. When fear tries to hand you the same old bag, notice it. And instead of automatically taking it, ask, do I really need to carry this into the next moment? That one pause is powerful because many people are living as if every mental creation deserves to travel with them, and it doesn't. You can let the whole be over. You can let the shot be over. You can let the conversation be over. You can let the old version be over. You can let the false story be over. You do not have to keep feeding it and protecting it, improving it, and dragging it into the future. That is freedom. And I think that is one of the most compassionate truths, too, because this is not about attacking yourself for what your mind created. It's about recognizing that your fearful mind may have created things that your deepest self never agreed to keep. And that is different. You do not have to hate the pattern to release it. You do not have to shame the fear to stop identifying with it. You do not have to attack the old self to stop dragging it forward. You just have to become clear. And clarity is powerful. So if I were to leave you with one thing today, it would be this. A lot of people are still carrying things in their mind, their body, or identity, and nervous system simply because they got used to carrying them. But used to is not the same as true, and used to is not the same as aligned, and used to is not the same as necessary. And that means you have more freedom than you think. You do not have to keep everything your mind created. You do not have to keep every old fear, every old story, every old identity, every false meaning, every pressure pattern, every interpretation that fear made and ego preserved. You can sort, you can discern, you can release, you can keep what is true and let the rest go. And that is not weakness. That is wisdom. That is healing. That is peace. That is performance freedom. That is getting closer to your higher self. That is making room for something deeper, truer, lighter, and more powerful to lead. So maybe the question this week is not only, what do I need to change? Maybe it is, what am I still carrying that I no longer need to keep? Because sometimes life gets better not when you become someone else, but when you finally stop preserving what was never truly you. So, of course, I'd love to help you. I have free web classes, online courses, hypnosis meditation downloads, and lots of other goodies. Check them out at dawngrant.com because I really would love to help you.